You're listening to Parents You've Got This, the expert guide to parenthood.
The complete guide to pregnancy, birth, baby and parenthood.
This week on the Expert Guide to Parenthood podcast, we're talking all about how to find some calm and peace in the parenting journey. As let's face it, being a parent is stressful and most of the time we feel like we don't got this. But don't worry, this week we have called in one of our special experts to help us find a little inner peace.
We are joined by Denise Orloff, our yoga, mindfulness and meditation and self-care expert, and she is going to be sharing some strategies on how we can find that elusive peace. Denise is the founder of Yoga LYFE Yoga Studio, and she is a big champion of nurturing people and nurturing communities, and we are so grateful for her time today. Welcome, Denise. It's lovely to see you.
Ladies.
Lovely to have you here.
So good to be here. So good to be here. Yeah.
Now, when we think about yoga and mindfulness, it can seem a little bit overwhelming, and as parents, something that we need to add to our to-do list rather than to make our lives easier. Do you have some suggestions that you can share on how we can incorporate yoga and mindfulness into our everyday lives without them becoming a burden or something else that we're feeling guilty about not doing enough of?
Yeah. I think there's a little misnomer about what meditation and mindfulness is, and that there are formal practices, and it's great to sit cross-legged and like chant for hours and hours on end, but that's not practical for all of us householders who have busy lives. So there's many ways that we can approach it, but I just said this to you earlier actually, Freya, just stopping and allowing yourself a little bit of pause, whether it's with the family, like allowing everything to maybe slow down a little bit. That's mindfulness, being present to whatever's going on right now and allowing yourself to actually lean in and listen in. That's pretty much mindfulness right there. So simple, really. Not easy to do, though.
So important. It should be simple, shouldn't it? But you're right. I think that could be an immensely powerful way for people to start to regain some control as well and consciously think, I'll try and stop. I'll try and slow down.
Yeah. I think that's it. It's that pause, and whatever people will say, yoga and meditation, there's very many practices. It's multidimensional. However, it's that finding presence, and whether that's stopping, whether it's taking a deeper breath, whether it's closing your eyes for a minute, even as the craziness of the household whirs around you, it helps us to reset and really tune into what is really important. And it's not getting the dishes done per se, do you know what I mean? It mightn't even getting the kids to their practice on time. What really is important is that everyone's safe and seen and heard, and just pausing and owning that a little bit is really important.
Yeah, and that's really hard, isn't it? I think because we want to be perfect parents, so we're trying to be there on time. And sometimes, I catch myself almost dragging the kids to the front door, and you're like, what am I doing? Just so we can get there right at the exact time, or is it more important just to breathe, like you said, and wait and pause and allow them to get to the front door? And maybe you might be a couple of minutes late, but does it really matter?
Does it really matter? Actually, a really dear friend, a new mum, and she's an older mum, she's in her early 40s, and it was surprising to her how hard it's been to be a mum. And she was a perfectionist. She was a lawyer, so she's got all kinds of crazy expectations on herself, and she's like, I've had to throw it all out the window because I know nothing, and that's okay. And she was saying how her son, who's now 14 months old, was actually teaching himself to eat, and he had the spoon upside down eating the rice, and she was trying to turn it around, and he was getting so mad with her and so frustrated with her, and she realized she had to step away and let stuff be a bit messy because it was not really getting in his mouth at all, but in his process allow him to get there and maybe let go of some of that perfection and expectation.
Yeah, and maybe we're supposed to slow down, they're slow, but maybe we're supposed to slow down. I noticed when I became a parent, suddenly I noticed the seasons. I noticed spring, winter, because it was colder, and I was trying to get a jacket on the kids, or they were picking up a tiny little leaf, or they'd come and pick a little plant and give you a flower, and suddenly you notice the seasons, you slow down and you notice what's around you. And I guess that's about being present, isn't it?
I would say that is a lesson in itself. How about pausing and noticing the beauty around you?
Yeah.
Noticing, being in nature, kicking your shoes off and just feeling what it feels like with your kids to be in that moment just in time. That's mindfulness. That having your eyes open and gazing at nature, at the ocean moving, at a stream, or even watching your kids laugh. How gorgeous is that, And so I think as parents, I know I'm guilty of it anyway. Maybe no one else. You're trying to get them to everywhere they want to get and provide everything that you want them to be. And sometimes we need to get out of their way and let it be messy and see the beauty in that.
Yeah, and sometimes the joys between the moments. I know I kind of look back, and when you think about your own childhood, you look at it and you think, was it about getting to that destination or doing that activity, or was it, that feeling you had with your parents where you were between the moments of sitting in the car with them on the way to sport, or, getting the dinner ready, what did your mum smell like? What did your dad smell like? I think that's actually the magic of childhood, and that's a bit like mindfulness is about noticing those moments, even the hard ones, isn't it? And cherishing them.
Yeah,
that you can get through them.
But I do think it's also good to introduce practices to your kids, and they don't have to be labelled as mindfulness practice or meditation. I did make my kids, I figured if you're brushing your teeth, you could meditate, so I kind of did do that with my kids. But I think you can introduce things like at the dinner table. Tell me one thing that made you laugh today. That's a mindfulness practice.
Yes.
Celebrate one thing that was exciting that happened to you today. Or maybe share something that was uncomfortable or sad. And listen, right? That's a practice, listening, taking that time. And I think it's that whole pausing and stopping. And as parents, sometimes we are too busy with the doing and getting and being, just to stop.
I'm really curious about the brushing the teeth and meditate. How does that work? What would you say to them to encourage them to do that? Was it just an awareness of the action that they were doing and the way it felt?
No, it was formal. It was seated, and if they had friends sleeping over, they had to do it as well. So we all sat in a circle in the living room, and so I taught kids yoga for years and years and years. So my kids all did yoga. But we did, just once a week, we did a formal meditation practice together as a family. And my kids still meditate a little bit, so that's nice. So I would guide them. We would do some breath work. I like to chant, so we'd do a little of that. There was a singing bowl involved, and so it was about listening, and it was about gratitude. So we would do something that you would be grateful for. It was often the cats, So not often me, but that's okay. So we did that formal practice for years and years and years and years, and but we did the dinner practice for years and years and years as well. So I just think explore what works for you guys, and then if you do it, your kids, you're their role model. So whatever you do, they take notice of. It's not about telling them to do it, right?
Yeah. And so how, as a parent, obviously you've got to be mindful of what you're doing, but how do you help with stress? So your child's not sleeping, you're up for hours on end patting, or you're thinking, I really want to get to that class, but now my kid's got gastro. How do you cope with that stress of parenthood with wanting to still be grateful for the experience, but how do you cope with the stress of it?
It's hard because it's out of our control, as is all of life, really. However, I think leaning into what's going on is your practice. So if they're sick and you need to be there with them and they nap, then you nap. It's not about running away to fill up. You fill up in that moment of time. I think it looks different for everyone. Breath is so key, taking a moment just even to take a few breaths. With the kids love to breathe. Place your hand on your belly and feel your body move with your breath. They love that. You can lay on the floor, you could put a rock on it. There's different ways. I think one of my most favorite is just put your hand on your heart. How good does that feel? Try it. It feels really good. Just a hand on your heart. You got this. You're stronger than you think, always, and you're doing the very best you can at any moment. Isn't that a good reminder?
Definitely. And I think too, what you're saying about that with kids is we're always learning, that's what I try and say to my kids. I'm learning to be a good mum here too, we're in this together. We're both learning how have this relationship together, and it's okay to stuff up. Like,
they're our best teachers, Christy, aren't they?
Yeah,
the kids
100%.
So many amazing lessons. Yeah,
they teach us a lot.
Yeah, tell them that. How awesome is that to feel inspired by your children?
Yeah,
and I think then they start doing the same thing to you, and that feels good.
And you can also see yourself in them sometimes, like, and I need to do better. Like if they're like telling their brother or sister off, you need to brush your teeth. You're like, okay, I need to do better, or I'm doing quite a good job. They're being empathetic and they're caring for their sibling. I think you can see that.
My son, who's 23, my youngest, was just sharing with us at dinner the other night. His first word to a really dear friend when we went to her house was mess. MESS. I know. And who did he get that from? From me saying, what a mess. Like, and so that's what he's telling her, like, what a mess. I was like, okay, Denise, good lesson to learn, right? Careful what you're thinking, let alone what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah. And also too, I think about changing your perspective. Like sometimes, instead of I have to do this washing, I get to do this washing because I've got beautiful children to look after, and I'm so lucky that I've got a nice house that I can wash the children's clothes in and give them clean clothes. Like I get to love them, and like in thinking about washing or chores, I get to love them. I get to have that really change things for me. I don't know.
That there's a joy for it.
Yeah. And the mindfulness of just, yes, I've got this big pile here, but,
Yeah, and then sometimes maybe just letting the washing, like, it's okay to be a mess. I mean, I used to mop the floor every day. Like, no one else noticed except for me. Like, seriously, it wasn't important. And going and bouncing on the trampoline with the kids. Like, I think, to your point, we don't have often enough time to do our own practice, like to get away and exercise or do a yoga class or whatever fills you up. Pickleball's on my list right now. But just to go and actually run around with the kids, you're getting your body moving, you're getting your heart rate opening up to like the presence of this moment. They feel good, you'll feel better as well. Don't just watch them do it with them. Get in there, exactly.
And they're the things that they remember as well.
I know.
So they're the beautiful moments that you can be in control of and really make. We wanted to talk to you about parent guilt because it is such a real thing. So, when there's things that we know that we should do but we just can't do them, and whether it's practically we can't or emotionally we can't, maybe we don't have just any more left in the tank to give, or we're feeling guilty because we've dropped a ball, we've disappointed our child in some way by not doing something how we said we would or how we'd like to, and we can be our own worst critics.
Yes.
I love what you said earlier about putting your hands on your heart, because there's something so healing about that when you're feeling vulnerable and disappointed in yourself and guilty. Are there any other strategies like that for parents in those sorts of moments where, they just wish it had gone a little bit differently?
And I'm speaking only from personal experience, right? But I absolutely think talking about it, apologising to whomever it is, whether it's your children or your partner, because sometimes we blame them, don't we? Because they haven't been around or they didn't do enough of this or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so communication, owning the stuff that you perhaps haven't got right. And we all have our biases and we all have our things that trigger us for sure, but being able to reflect, taking that moment of pause, and I think communication, like talk about it. Say like, okay, I wasn't proud of myself how I spoke to you before. Maybe you and I can have a talk about how that could have been better. Can be actually, you take in yoga philosophy, we would say it's a klesha, it's a blemish, it's something that's ugly and not valuable, and we have that opportunity there to turn it into a Lakshmi, which is a goddess, which is covered in jewelry and gorgeous and fabulous, and we call it Shri. And so we take something that isn't valued and that is like seems like less than, and we make it something that's beautiful and shiny and valuable. Any moment.
I love that. And that's connection, isn't it? Let's face it, like the perfect person is actually so hard to connect with. When people share their vulnerabilities with you, suddenly you think, oh, actually, you're human, you're like me, we can connect. And I love what you said about repairing. I think there's something so valuable in that with our kids, and it teaches them, doesn't it, that then they can do that too. You can stuff up, but you can go back to the person and say, you know what, I didn't mean it that way, it just came out wrong, you know.
Can we be a role model for our children on how to talk to each other as a way moving forward that we're actually helping forge a better way of humanity? And now, like always really, but like it's a really important lesson to be role modeling to our kids. It's
and to your own self, like what you were saying, if you're forgiving to them, then they're hearing that voice, I can forgive myself. You know?
And not blame, like everyone's blaming and pointing fingers, and so, right, like...
Yeah, and what I can be grateful for, like what you were saying before, you know, building in those gratefulness practices. So then they're coming to the dinner table prepared with what went great today.
They would know. So
think
about it becomes, we had a special plate, and I would put it under a napkin, and no one knew who would get it that night, and often we'd have other kids coming, and so they might get it. And everyone had to go around the table and celebrate that person. So I want to celebrate Christy because she's always so joyful and got the best smile on her face, and that just makes me feel happy. And so everyone around the table will go around and celebrate that person. So
that's beautiful. Oh, that's a beautiful one, isn't it?
And I would say the other thing is don't do it by yourself. My children, we lived in the States for 19 years, away from my family, in New Zealand, and away from my husband's family actually. And so gather people around you, whether they have kids the same age or not. Like, make friends with your neighbours. That's what you girls are about, Freya.
That's exactly what we're about. And it's that feeling like you can lean on others and wanting them to lean on you. I think so often we don't ask for help, but we would so readily give it.
Yes.
All we have to do is just ask and build that, that village that we're bringing back.
Yeah. And also to people, like, I think when you have children, grandparents, in the community will come up to you and be like, and tell you a story, and it reminds them of a place when they had that joyful moment with their child, and it automatically connects you, and so I think it's listening to those elders, listening to other people that have been there and done it, and often people are willing to share that, gosh, it's tough, like there's bits that are amazing about it, but it's hard, but I think the joy far outweighs it in the end, and asking for help, isn't it, like, and assembling your village. At Yoga LYFE, you're all about community.
All about community. So important.
Tell us a little bit more about how you assemble a community around you.
By being that who needs help, by saying, I need you to help me in this way. And to your point, Freya, like if you ask someone for help, they actually feel immensely valued. And so I'm all about all of our instructors welcome you. You feel like welcomed when you come into that space. There's they encourage you to turn and speak to someone sitting next to you, which can be a little uncomfortable for some people, but I hope and I believe that we all want to be seen and heard, and that's what we're trying to cultivate, is that opportunity to really lean into what it means to be a mindful practitioner, whether you want to call it yoga or meditation, breath work, however you want to term it. Move, breathe, find presence, pause, and then connect. Share what you're experiencing, because to your point, a lot of us share the same experiences, have the same experiences, but we haven't told each other. We could help each other, or even just being heard helps, doesn't it? Like just someone listening to what's going on.
Yeah, so if you are having a tough time, it's a good point, go and find a friend, tell them how you're feeling, get down to one of Denise's incredible yoga classes. I can't tell you, they're so amazing. I wish I could just go every day soon. When my kids are bigger, I'll be going every day.
Still be moving in.
That's right.
Bring the kids. We love the kids.
Oh, well, Denise, thank you so much for coming on the Expert Guide to Parenthood podcast today. Guys, you've been listening to the Expert Guide to Parenthood podcast. We hope you've got some tips and tricks about how to get some inner peace.
Never forget, parents.
You've got this.
Join a Parents You've Got This masterclass today to be prepared, excited and educated for pregnancy, birth, baby and parenthood. Visit www.parentsyouvegotthis.com.au and sign up for a masterclass today.